straight from Boston. It's Founder Thought, the show that has everything from advice, ideas, and inspiration from founders and business owners that made it all happen.
On this episode, Stefanie and Oz speak with Devon Trevelyan of Night Moves Café, a board game cafe in Brookline, Mass. They discuss the many unique aspects of the business, as well as the importance of building community.
Welcome to Founder Thought. Today we're here with Devon from Night Moves Café. Hi, Devon. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
A little about me. I've been a Night Moves Cafe owner for about 8 years now.
Oh, wow.
We started out very, very small. We're still very small, but that's kind of how we like it.
Yeah.
I went to Northeastern, got a degree in music, never used it. I mean, that's not true. I worked at Harmonix for a little bit, and then in every Night Moves there is a piano, because
nice.
At first I thought, well, if nobody shows up, I'll just have a very expensive practice room and that'll be great. And so since then, never left Boston. Love it. Love the area, love the community.
Yeah.
So
Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And then moved around a lot as a kid and went to college here.
Excellent. So I guess the first question to get into sort of the meat of what you do, where did the idea of your concept come from?
So Night Moves is a board game cafe, but it really cultivates a community, a late night community, and it is different from a bar or a club. I studied abroad in Prague when I was going to school, and they have this wonderful like late night community of like coffee shop that's open late, lots of conversation, kind of a dynamic sound when everybody's just sort of having a conversation that's not super loud, but it's not, it's not a dance club, it's not a bar. It's just, it doesn't really exist in the US, like that sort of like late night coffee bar instance.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because Oz and I talk about that quite a bit because Oz being from overseas, we talk about how in the U.S. nothing is open late. Everything closes so early. There isn't that place that you can just go and hang out,
this is a
relax without you're forced into a bar, you're forced into a club. Like you have to be in a drinking environment and you can't just be hanging out somewhere. Like they just don't have that available.
Overseas, actually, we have like places you go at 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock, just sit down and hang out, drink coffee, tea, shisha. So we have all these places. We don't have it here. It's weird. I keep actually discuss this with Stephen. We don't have those places. It's weird. But actually, do question regarding the cafe and the came board. Do you consider yourself a cafe business or came board business? Because this is what I'm trying to understand the idea here.
Absolutely. Definitely a board game business, not a cafe. The cafe is sort of ancillary. If you look at the numbers, if you were to look and say, oh, you're a cafe, are you successful? The answer is no. Like, we don't sell enough, we don't sell concessions in order to make our revenue. Our revenue is certainly based off of people just coming in the door and wanting to spend time there and wanting to support that area, sort of live in that.
So this what another question comes. If you're not turnover, because I saw one from your video talking about you're not turnover business, how you maintain and how you continue, because I see the ticket $10 for some entry. So how you maintain, because how many people you gonna every day enter? Like I'm thinking like 20, say people every night.
Right.
So how you maintain and how you continue growth?
So the growth aspect of it is definitely word of mouth. People like who come, they have a great time. They tell everybody else they had a great time. It's very as a business owner, like I always like, it's been 8 years and I'm always like, well, no one's going to come tonight. Tonight's going to be the night when it's like, all right, everyone saw it. It was cool. It was a flash in the pan and now it's done. Cause I understand how fads work, that sort of thing, but that has actually been the opposite. And I think a lot of that has come with like, the culture that we live in where everybody's on a screen, everyone is on their phone all the time, is shifting to being like, well, I really value sitting down with my friends. I don't do that often enough. I'm at work, I'm doing this. And so having a place to do that isn't, someone's house is actually really nice because it's a neutral setting that no one has to clean anything. It's very appealing to be able to sit with your friends or your friends or your family or your couple. I mean, when I opened Night Moves, I thought, I wanted to target like 25 to 35 discretionary income. And when I opened, I just had a full net that got families, elderly, kids. It was just everyone. It wasn't, and that's one of the coolest part about Night Moves is that you can sit down and have a table of complete nerds and a table of complete jocks and a family, and they will all talk to each other and be like, "Oh, hey, you like this game? Cool, I like this game." And it definitely is like a neutral playing field that just makes everybody, feel comfortable.
Oh, that's great. I actually just wrote down a question like, do strangers get together because they're conversing and they're enjoying the same games, or how does the games work? So you've got thousands of games, I would imagine.
Over 2,000.
Over 2,000.
Yeah, so people just come in, they just choose a game, they sit down and start playing. So what are some of the most popular games people play?
So the most popular depends on the person. Like everyone likes everything different. It's really a buffet, if you will. Like we have people who like to sit there for 6 hours and play the most complicated, mind melting games. That's me. And then you have people who just want to play Monopoly or Uno, or people who want to bluffing games, or you want to have a cooperative game. Or I mean, there's such a large variety of games that a lot of people, when they walk in, and we've shifted the way we present the games more recently. But when you used to have it, the retro games, you walk in, first thing you see is like Monopoly, Sorry, Parcheesi, all the games that people have grown up with.
Sure.
And they're like, oh, that's a lot of games. And they turn the corner, and there's just library wall to wall of games they've never heard of. And they're just like, what? This is just an industry that I have no idea about. This is awesome.
Yeah.
This is great. We definitely try to facilitate everyone playing with everyone. So coming up with a system that allows people to let them know, oh, I'm free. Like we would love to play with more people. As the same if you're like on a date, or if you're on, with someone that you want to spend some time with, they also have that to sort of have their own time. But yeah, we try to facilitate games, especially if it's a game you don't know. We teach games, so you don't have to sit there for 45 minutes and like, well, the worst part about learning a new game is that 45 minutes we're like, well, how do I play? What do I do? What do I say? And we try to like basically eliminate that, get people going right away, so the fun can begin immediately.
Do you have a group come to play, like a group like wedding, party, company?
I've done anything from weddings, corporate events. We had a bris. We have people who do their like lots of bachelor parties, lots of bridal shower, like this.
Oh wow!
The whole gamut, and it's a really good way to, as I said, to have a touchstone for everyone. Because if you do like an event where you go bowling, or you go axe throwing, or you do something that is an event based where someone's like, well, that's not really my thing, but I want to be there. Games is almost a coverall. It's really close to a coverall because everyone has like a portion of their life that was brought up on games. That's just kind of how it happened. And it might not be, you might not have your own collection at home. You might not be right, but actually it's funny. I thought that we would be very attractive to the people who were super into the hobby. But in fact, it's the opposite. In fact, the people who are super into this hobby, who have their own library, and they play their games in their house. And so it's more of a transition to where people can like see that there is a bigger variety of games that actually exist.
Amazing.
Actually, one from the question I saw, because I like the way you explain it, and I thought it was very insightful. When you talk about the dating, people come date, like, because when you go for any dating, like, you have a lot of people come for date, yes? And because explain how we talk about it's awkward when you go, you have to wait, and this is you engage, and it's different target, I felt, it's different persona people come in. So if you can say it in your own word, because I was actually.
I wish that I could, if I had a nickel for every date that OkCupid sent to Night Moves, I tell you. But we've done speed dating, we've done all sorts of things. Games are great because, and it's funny. I mean, they either last, 2 minutes or all night. There's no like in between. People are like, oh, you like games? Let's play a game, and you find out a lot about a person. When you have something else to do where you're both not, eating and waiting for the other person to close their mouth, it's just a very different dating setup. It's like, oh, we're in this together. And that's a learning experience rather than, tell me about how many brothers and sisters do you have? It's like, well, I'll sit here and listen and try to keep this conversation going while we do something. So it definitely facilitates that from a much more, a way for people to get to know each other, like much more easier than like an ice-breaking situation.
Sure. You know, also another one concept we talk about, the family. How family comes and they put phone. Actually, you have a family. I think comes. They put them
their
phone
phone,
separate, and they just sit down and play, just to communicate and engage with each other.
Well, it's funny because so in the beginning we got a lot of feedback that people were afraid that, you know, if you pay $10 per person for a family of 5, it's $50. You could go buy a board game for $50 because that's about what they cost for like a new, good,
Nice.
board game. And they said, you know, we could do that, but we could go to a movie. We could do all these things. They would much rather they put all their phones in a stack on the table and they just engage with their kids. They engage with their family members because that's a way that they can spend that time. And they're only there for an hour. They're not there for very long. And that is, they could stay the whole night, but they said that that's much more valuable to them than sort of this, you know, being at home is also like sort of a trap in the sense that like everyone sort of has their routines.
Everybody has their own stuff.
Everybody has their own stuff. They're like,
Yeah.
you know, we could all be at the dinner table just on our phones. And they're
Yeah,
just like, this is a great
distracted.
way to just communicate and to get into, you know, talk to each other. Yeah, that's it.
Amazing.
Actually, I do have one more question about
Sure.
the persona. What your favorite persona? So, what your favorite people come to your store, and those people, like you say, okay, do you like the people knowledge about the game, or you don't like people with the knowledge about the game?
I mean, personally,
Yes.
I love to introduce people to games that they didn't know existed and
Oh,
that
okay.
have this. I mean, for me, it's a personal joy because I like. It definitely is sort of like dipping your toes into a stream of something you've never tried before. Maybe because everyone has a game adjacent friend.
Sure.
But they're like, oh, well, you know, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't feel confident in this or that. And if someone explains to you, like, oh, that's not that hard to understand. And like people get going and you can see them really enjoying themselves. And that to me is like on top of like the community that's around them, like all of those things put together is just that's why I do it.
Amazing. So, what's your favorite game?
Absolutely is Gaia Project.
Okay.
It is a 3 to 4 hour
Wow.
perfect information building game where you colonize planets and it's very strategic. Like I have a chess background. If you didn't guess from the name of the business, I played chess since I was very small. I competed nationally at certain points and then sort of stepped away from it. But all of the information you have is right there. And that to me is like making decisions, and the way that you make those decisions is just it's a beautiful thing.
So the name it came from because actually I do have a question about the name. So let's talk about the name. How you came up with the name?
So Night Moves is a triple entendre. You have obviously the chess piece. It's the only chess piece that moves uniquely from any other piece.
Sure.
It's my personal favorite. You have moving at night. We wanted to be open late. So having people being able to be like, oh, we can go there. And then the third one is it's a Bob Seger reference. It's just I was raised on classic rock, and it's a good one to reference. But
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, obviously, people coming into a cafe, they're sitting down very closely. They're very, tight together. Pandemic doesn't really work with that kind of environment. So, what did you guys do? How did you guys survive the pandemic?
how did we survive the pandemic? We were closed for over a year and a half.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Took on a lot of water.
Yeah.
Went into a lot of debt, but got applied for every grant under the sun.
Yeah.
Still dealing with those issues, but I had community members who paid their membership through the pandemic.
Now let's talk about after the pandemic. How you see stuff happening? Do you see uptake in people coming back? Because I feel people right now want like.
Yeah,
mean,
they want to be out.
I can tell you that since October, we've had like the best months we've had ever.
Amazing.
Oh, wow.
Because people are coming out. There's
Yeah.
like they just want to be not in their house where they were for
they
months
wanna
at
be
a time.
together,
Exactly.
probably.
And they want to be together. They want to
Yeah.
see people. They want to do things. And at first, I thought that the mask mandate and the way that it would, change the experience. Because Night Moves is all about the experience. It's
Yeah.
about giving someone a good time and them appreciating that, telling their friends, and then doing it again. And that just is a constant cycle. But yeah, I thought it would change the experience, but people got really used to it. They're like, I'll put on my mask, take it off, and it tends to be a different community in the sense that Night Moves has always been a place for people who want to go out, right? It's a place for people who don't want to go to a bar to go out. It's sort of it's a different. It allows for a different community to be there, and that is a much more, I think, thoughtful, I guess, is basically what they want to say, is that people make decisions. Like, if you like board games, you like to think about things, you like to bluff, like do all these things, but you're still processing, right? And that's a thing that they like to do a lot. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yes.
I want to take a step back and just kind of go back to the beginning, because we wanted to learn a little bit more about what did you learn early on when you came up with this sort of concept. You're like, okay, this is definitely what we're doing. What were some of the learnings that you had early on that took that brand from sort of the concept into action? Like, how did you do it? Like, what were the things that you were learning along the ways?
Flexibility, 100%. And people have asked, I've gotten that question before and being like, well, what would you say this? And I say, well, you have to be able to think outside the box. And it's kind of a cliche in the sense that, like, well, yeah, you always have to do something different. But everyone who's ever made a business, who's done something, like the guy next to you, then that's already been done. And this was, as I said before, like, I didn't have oh, well, now you should have payroll, and now you should have, these are the things the boxes you should check.
Actually, we just we talk about the Zubit World brand we had. We opened actually 5 locations over the holiday season. It just simply was shit show. It was a shit show between high-end revenue and cost, and you're not covering the expenses. Yeah, we did a lot of revenue, yes, but did not make any profit. So those the linen comes with the blame when you're in a business. No,
I think anybody who thinks that, in a second you turn around. That being said, Night Moves was profitable from day one. Like, people were there coming in. I didn't. I made an entire Kickstarter video. Like, I thought I would crowdfund it. I didn't even use it. Like, people haven't seen it. It's a great video.
Should use it now.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it. But yeah, it's.
So where you see it in the future? Do you see you continue with one location? Do you see you open open for more community base? Where you see it in the future?
If there is a place that would work, so there are communities in which could really benefit from having this space on all fronts, and if it would work in those areas, I think then I would open another location and have someone who could champion that. But currently, my life is about to very much change. I'm about to be a dad. It's very exciting.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Exciting.
So, I'm constantly told that I should probably not take on more things. But it's, that being said, I would be open to it.
Have you thought about franchisees? Like, the idea is a very good idea.
One thing I've learned is people say, how do you, what is it about that's good? Being an expert and doing one thing well, I think is really important. A lot of other board game cafe, restaurant things have opened and closed because I think they want to be a restaurant, they want to be a cafe, they want, they're trying to, they're taking different models and doing too many things. And that's, in my opinion, not the best. I think you should do one thing and do it well, and then from there grow. We, as I said before, we are working on our convention scene. So what was interesting is that within the board game community, new board games are getting designed all the time. There's I think I heard a statistic yesterday of 45 to 50 new board games a week.
Oh, wow.
That's just always. And all these people who want to get into the industry or create a game, they're trying to break through. So we would go to these conventions and see large companies there. And the smaller companies would have a much, like the barrier to entry is really hard because you have to spend, thousands of dollars on a marketing chance that you might be seen or that people might like your product. So we as a company would get a larger space. And since we don't do, we do retail there for people, but we're not trying to sell anything, right? I want people to come to the cafe and have a good time. I specifically tried to stay away as much as I can from retail sales, for the better or for worse. And so what we'll do is we'll host 18 to 20 publishing companies, smaller ones, sell their games for them. They make 80% of the profit. They pay a smaller, like a fraction of the price they would normally pay to get in the booth, and we represent them, and people say, oh, this is the Night Moves Indie Board Game Showcase. So then they can, people get to see and play their games, and they get demo time, and it really just, it's really helpful, and it makes the convention itself less static, right? So then you only have big companies doing their own things and sort of ignoring the little guys. And so we're sort of championing the little guys and having everybody there as a sort of a showcase.
Yeah.
And you're doing this in convention, yes?
I started in Boston, so PAX East is coming up in April. We do it there. We've since done it in Philadelphia, PAX Unplugged. Basically, I'm trying to do basically the largest East Coast sides, because that's where I live. But have plans for a new business that hopefully will be surrounding that area.
Is there any company board company come for you and contact you? Listen, we have a new board company. Can let people test it in your location, store?
So it's interesting, I used to have to cold call people and be like, hey, you look like you have a cool new game coming out. You're going to come to Boston. Would you like to be part of the showcase? The thing. That was earlier, I'd say the last 4 years. This year, we already have people calling us saying, hey, we really want to be at the showcase. We really want to do this. I have people call the cafe all the time being like, hey, I'd love to have our game in your library because people will see it and they'll play it and then they'll buy it. That's sort of that's what you hope for.
Sure, yes.
Absolutely. Picking up those pieces is hard for me because from a business aspect, like you said, we could probably be a very successful retail establishment. But I have no interest. That'll probably be really good. But I'm much more about the service, about the community, and that makes me happy. And I think that it's really important, 1,000%. If take away anything from other people starting to say this, doing what you do to make you happy is really important because you don't want to hate your hobby. Yeah. You also don't, if you love something, you don't want to hate it. You know what I'm saying? That's a really important thing to keep that balance. I've had 1 or 2 or maybe 3 full-time employees over the last 8 years. And the first thing I say when I knock on the door is quality of life is so much more important than anything else. If you that's, and people understand that and they really appreciate the time and the energy that we put into that.
So this what brings us back. Now 8 years, yes, been 8 years. What one thing you learned, and not it's about life quality, it's quality of life. What one thing you would advise for? Listen, when you start business, you become expert in accounting, you become expert in payroll, you become expert in everything. You have to become expert. You have no option. So what one thing you think oh my God, this is what everybody should be thinking about?
Man. I think I said it earlier, flexibility. For me, trying to figure out health code. That was a real new one for me. Those things that in your life changes, right? You walk into a space when you're have designed one or opened a business and you look at it and you're starting critiquing. You're like, how much is that? What is that? How did you do this? Your brain just goes to all those different places now. Yeah. And before I had no concept of the amount of detail that it takes to open a space, to have the back end of taxes of like, common ventures, the licensing, all of those things that no one thinks. When you're a customer and you walk into someplace, you don't think, well, I wonder how they pay. Like there's a whole lot of stuff that you don't even question. Being flexible, talking to people, I think that's probably it's probably my best quality, I think, in being able to do this was that I like to approach people. I like to engage in conversation and ask questions and be flexible. Like, well, I know you said this, but what about this? Like always having an alternative. What would to go back to your question, what would my advice be? It's hard. Like I use how do I stay in this? How to make my money? I don't make very much money. And that was not an accident.
Yeah,
in the
it
sense
wasn't
that,
the goal. I don't think. Yeah,
it was the idea that this way, I get to see my friends. I get to make new ones. I get to play with people. The entire business itself, and it's growing. Like we're having more events. We're having more sales. We're having things are changing and growing, but it's not an overnight sensation.
yes.
Yeah.
There
Do you
was-
do things like tournaments and stuff
Yep.
like that?
Oh yeah, we've done all sorts.
Special nights, like theme nights, or
so many
things like
different
that.
events.
Yeah.
And those really, as a cafe, the weekdays are your slow times.
Yeah.
The weekends are always packed. They're packed. Like
What time
we
do we open weekend? Like
11 a.m.
11 a.m.
11 a.m. and every Saturday night there is a wait list.
Oh, wow.
Every Saturday night. Like it's great. I always think it's not going to happen. I'm always like, today's the day. It's not going to happen. Then people show up, and we don't take reservations.
Yeah.
We don't. We do a lot of events, and that's sort of growing. But I guess my best advice would be, don't expect things to happen immediately.
Yeah.
This is the long con. This is the long game is where you're at, is that you sustain and you just keep going and you slowly build.
Sure.
Now, mind you, that's not always the case, but I think if I have a friend, who, work hard, play hard is sort of his motto, and it's fine. It's like in chunks, and like, I'm a very binary person, like this is on and it's off, that sort of thing. But I think I had to learn that I need to be able to balance and slowly gain.
Sure.
And that was real hard for me at first.
Yeah, because I don't think most of business open becomes success overnight. A few of them does, but all the business long term hold to make
It
sure
takes like learning and changing and shifting
and failing and flexibility. As you keep talking about
Yeah.
flexibility, it's a huge thing because you gotta be able to change. Because most of the time the plan for me is it's like I'm going to Cambridge. I know I have to go for store drive. It's very easy, but usually sometimes store drive close, Mass Ave close, so you have to figure out a different way to get there. So that's not an easy. So let me ask you: do you have a mentor?
A mentor?
Is somebody did give you a mentor? And
I've had a couple mentors over the time, for sure. I worked, I would go with two. The first would be the owner of the Ben & Jerry's franchise in Boston.
Sure.
So when I was in college, I worked for Ben & Jerry's. Out of college, I drove across the country and gave away ice cream to people. It was great.
Nice.
It was the best job ever.
I'm sure people loved you.
I was free ice cream. It was
Yeah.
great. It was the best bargaining chip in any restaurant. You could walk in and just it was great. But yeah, so the owner and franchisee there, he owns a couple stores in the area and was 1,000% very helpful when I was starting out. Being like, oh, I have an accountant in here, and if you're gonna do this, you should try this, and basically someone who had also who had also started out trying to open his own shop in Boston and has grown and had a family and been successful, but again, stepwise, not overnight, which was important. And then the owner of Eureka Puzzles also showed me a lot of things, like he used to work in tech and went to the office in the suit and what he wanted to do, what he didn't want to do, opened a games and puzzle store and, walks to work because he's like, it's very specifically, I can walk to work. I don't have to wear anything. My commute is great. Like, this is a very important life quality decision that, people would take for granted and be like, oh, well, you own a retail shop. Okay, fine. But there were very important things, the reason of that happened to make that possible to stop the grind or stop things from happening, that sort of thing. So both those I would say the two mentors. It's hard for me to say that those are the main two because Night Moves is made by the community. It's made by the people. I have families. I'm remiss not to mention Joanna is someone who I taught their kids chess. And she's an amazing asset to the cafe. The members are an amazing asset to the cafe. I have no problem leaving the cafe and going to buy milk to come back. And people are like, but the business, like someone could take all the board games. Like, no, it'll be fine. And I think that a lot of establishments are run being like, well, these are the things you have to do. You can't ever walk away from this. You have to things. And I think changing the game to what fits for you, I think that's where I would say. My advice is you need to do what fits for you. Don't take your advice from the person next door, see what they've done, and modify it so it fits your life. Because if you try to be too stuck, you're not flexible.
This is actually a good advice. I heard it actually from a couple of people the last few months. People, very successful people. Great advice. Any more question we have for?
I think that's it. So any final thoughts that you have? Anything else that you could, words of wisdom that you could share with folks?
One thing that's big, which is really hard, it's because all I want to do is support your community. You have to be hard in the idea of what you know to be true. Like, big lesson I learned is like your friends, the people who you care about the most, when you mix them with your business, you're going to make less efficient decisions. Like that's just it's going to happen and you have to be okay with, like, you have to know that up front. If you create relationships, because you're going to have relationships with people over time.
Sure.
When those relationships mix, things are like, that efficiency is going to go down because they're not you. And you have to be okay with that. That's another real important piece of the puzzle that I think a lot of people are like, well, how can I have this relationship, with my coworker or my employee or my boss, and also be, have it work. And that is I think it's one of the reasons why I think Night Moves has stayed as itself for so long is that that's a really hard thing to have, a community-driven, wonderful place that is also like reliable, and you don't want to think differently of anybody else. You want to care about them. You don't want to necessarily be like, oh, well, why didn't you hear at this time? Like, those are hard decisions that have to be made. That was hard for me, for sure. That was something that I would say is a big one.
Absolutely. So if somebody wants to learn more about what you do, maybe come in and play, tell us where they can find you.
Night Moves Café is a board game cafe. It's on 1402 Beacon Street in Brookline. They can email me, nightmovescafe@gmail.com. They can text or call me. I'm very much an open book. And I think that because I've had so much help, I'm also willing to help as much as I can. Like, people call me all the time from like Pittsburgh or Arizona. My wife is like, you should be a board game cafe consultant. Like, that's the new business. And I was like, well, it's a possibility, but I feel like I've gotten so much support from other people that I'm happy to be like, yeah, this is our business model. They're like, that's crazy. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, true. But I'm, one of the happier people I know. And I feel very privileged for that and grateful, just because it's, I'm able to do that, do what I love, and share it with people.
Amazing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Founder Thought. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to podcasts or on the web at founderthought.com. Founder Thought is a production of Pepper Gang.